in this particular text, Jesus is talking as the Son, and he says, of that hour no man knows, not the Father, not the Son, nor the angels, or anybody else. There are certain things of Jesus' divine attributes that were veiled in the incarnation. For example, his glory was not seen. He didn't glow when he walked down the streets of Jerusalem. If they were walking in the dark, the disciples didn't get to not use a flashlight or something when Jesus was by because he glowed so much. But obviously, omnipresence, things like that. There was a veiling, and for some purpose that is not explained to us, for some purpose, Jesus, in that particular instance, he has supernatural knowledge elsewhere, but in that particular instance, that particular piece of knowledge has been veiled during the time of the incarnation.
A lot of people have a common sense idea, modern people, that if Jesus didn't know he was divine, then we can't worship him as divine. If he didn't know he was divine, because of course he wouldn't be God. If he was God, he would have omniscience. But even theologically, I think people need more theological education, even as much as they need more historical education. There's been a history of the doctrine of kenosis that goes way back in history, and Christian theologians have a lot of Christian theologians have always said when Jesus gave up his full divinity to become fully man, he had to give up some of his divine prerogatives, and one of those things could be omniscience. So the idea that Jesus, we don't have to imagine Jesus as walking around as divine, with a divine consciousness of his own status. And we even can use a very traditional Christian teaching of kenosis. Kenosis comes from the Greek word for emptying. And so Christian theologians have always said, a lot of them have always said, the human Jesus did not need to know he was divine in order for us still to worship him as divine. And that's been defended as a Christian doctrine for centuries.
Concept of the Trinity only came up after Christians already accepted the deity of Jesus. It was an effort, a philosophical effort to justify something they believed already, an absurdity they believed already. To believe a man is God, they had to come up with an idea of the Trinity. It wasn't that they first came up with the idea of the Trinity and then they said, oh, Jesus is the one that fits into the Trinity. Before Jesus came to the world, no one thought of the Trinity. So the Trinity is an excuse for idolatry.
David, notice that in that passage, Jesus doesn't say, I am the Son of God. He says, no one knows the hour except the Father. Not even the Son, but doesn't say whose Son. In fact, Jesus could have been referring here to the Son of Man, which is thought to be a heavenly figure who will come at the end of time. And according to Bruce Chilton, Jesus often spoke about that Son of Man coming in the future as a separate individual from Jesus himself. So there's some ambiguity in that passage, but what is clear is that just as you don't believe in the Quran, Muslims who are quoting this don't actually believe in the Bible in toto, in all of its verses. But the Muslim argument is that since Christians take this to be a verse of the Bible as an inspired word of God, and they take this to be a reference to Jesus, then it is clear that Jesus does not know when the hour will occur. And if there is one fact that he does not know, then he's not the all-knowing God. Now you say the kenosis doctrine helps us here. He emptied himself, came down. But does God empty himself of his knowledge? Like, is his knowledge like is a book that is either on the shelf if he decides to keep it there, or put it in his mind if he wants it, and he just leaves it on the shelf and comes down into the earth without his knowledge? It seems blasphemous even to think that way. And it is clear from the New Testament that Jesus is subordinate to the Father. Even Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, said that in the final analysis, all things will be handed over to God, who had first subjected things to Jesus, so that God will be all in all, which means that in the end, the Christ will be subjected to the Father. And if one is subjected to the other, they're not co-equal and co-eternal. It is interesting that you cited Acts of the Apostles, where Jesus said it's not for you to know the time and the hour, because that passage actually shows that what was expected is that Jesus should have sat on the throne of David and ruled temporally, and he didn't do that. And the Christian expectation is that it will be done in the future. So that's the whole problem, that if you say he is the Davidic Messiah, so far it looks like he failed, and it looks like the New Testament actually sets up people, and the Jews in particular, to think that Jesus is a failed Messiah. So the New Testament deceives them, whereas the Quran comes in and says, no, you didn't kill them, and in the first place, there is nothing in the Quran to indicate that he's a Davidic Messiah. So from the Quranic perspective, faith in Jesus rests on very logical and consistent grounds.